as much business as we can. Usually I overrun, but sometimes at some points I do ask you to be concise so that we can bring things back if I'm running out of time. But otherwise, it's hopefully an enjoyable place. One of the things I try to do, both my vice chair and myself, is to help with the topics that we have and understand the fact that everyone doesn't know everything. So there's no such thing as a stupid question. And it's better that you ask the question to get an answer rather than trying to assume and find a way forward. So, and what we'll try to do is as we go forward is to help. And when I get presenters to present, I do try to assume that we have a little or not a lot of knowledge, so that we can learn as we go along. I said this committee should be a learning opportunity as well as a scrutiny role. So thank you for that. So the small print, the agenda has been published on the council's website in advance of the meeting. Can I ask members and officers if they can kindly refer to the agenda page if they can? I know that there are some issues with different versions of ModGov and different papers, but hopefully it shouldn't be too much, because today is mostly about us being told some information and being able to question it as to decision making. A supplementary agenda pack was circulated on the 28th. Today's meeting will be run using the hybrid format, with committee members and key officers physically present in County Hall. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting. Just for clarity, not that we will be doing any votes, but for those of us, if it's the votes going to be taken by the members of council that are in the room and formally or acknowledged as members of this committee. There will be an audio recording made of the meeting to assist with the recording of decisions. And can I quickly further highlight, to enable the meeting to run, can you please use the chat function only for agenda items, please, and to indicate if you want to speak. In the same way, please raise your hand. Generally, the way that I work is I'll go committee members first. I listen to the officer, committee members first for questions, then members in the room, and then members online. And that way we can move it forward. And please don't ever be afraid to shout if I miss you. Speak only of my invitation. If you could help people, if you could say who you are before speaking. Remember to turn microphones off. Cameras is your choice. It is nice to see people online's faces. At least you're not I know that you're not nodding off or doing something else while you're there listening to our meeting. I think that's the facility. Oh yes, for those of you that need it, the facility in Teams and the ellipse button can be turned on for live captions. I know that it can be interesting, some of the interpretations, particularly of my Somerset accent when I'm talking proper. It does tend to confuse things a little bit, but otherwise we get there in the end. Okay, item 1 of our agenda. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Ordila, for whom Councillor Dingwall is substituting. We've also received apologies from Councillor Patrick.
I know that Oliver did say that he might be joining us virtually, because he's currently suffering with the COVID, so there's that. Evie. Thank you. Okay, item 2 of our agenda is declarations of interest. It's where members have the sorry, Chair. Go.
So certainly received notification that Councillor Simon Cowes will be able to attend. So I think I'd like to convey those apologies.
Thank you. It hadn't got to us, so that's fine. Andy, did you have anything? So just to be clear, so for apologies for absence, and if you could feed this back to your groups, it would be, if there are exceptional times, as it's our executive member is joining us virtually today because she has some transport issues, but we've got 110 councillors now, and if it's likely to be a known absence or not able to attend, it would be reasonable. We should be able to find a sub to come in. It gives people, members, a learning opportunity, and so if we could try to remember where possible, if it's a known absence for a particular reason, obviously emergency absence, but the ability to sub in is always here at the start, and 110 councillors, we've got plenty of scope to do it, and hopefully if I'm not scary enough, or for all committees particularly, the chairs would welcome people to come in and learn and experience the wonders of our committees, the way that they operate. Off of soapbox. Tessa.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you for passing my in-person apologies. Can I just make an observation? If Evie said something, I couldn't hear it, so I don't know what it was that Evie said. I think you invited Evie to say something. That's all.
I did that. Thank you for drawing that. So members, if you can remember, please, before you speak, if you turn the microphone on, then members that are virtual, Evie did send Jason's apologies, Tessa. So that was fine. But yeah, so we'll if you remember to turn the microphone on before you speak, that's helpful. Thank you. Declarations of interest, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my declaration of interest form didn't come in time to appear on this agenda, so I just wanted to be very clear. Parish Councillor for Western Zoyland, but also parent governor on a school that is local authority, and so is part of the core offer discussion that we'll have later.
Thank you. So most of those declarations are contained within the bit. So funny enough, the school that which I'm a governor has Ofsted in today and tomorrow, which is yeah, Jamie.
Just a gentle reminder from Dem Services colleagues, we still have over 50 councillors who haven't completed a new declaration of interest form. So if you could action that whilst you're in today, colleagues are very happy to try help you through it. But yeah, just a little gentle nudge there. Thank you.
Francis.
And while I'm not a member of any other parish council, I am a school governor of maintained schools, so it's a personal interest.
No, that's fine. So just for clarity, the declarations of interest that are relevant to the agenda today, if you've already declared them on your register of interest, then it's generally taken as read. But I know some of us are new and passing it by. That's correct, Jamie, isn't it? By reading of that. Thank you. Any other declarations? Moving on then. Item 3 of our agenda is to agree the minutes of the last meeting, which seems an eternity ago because it was the 6th of March earlier this year. And they've been circulated. Any points or issues in relation to those minutes? Are we happy?
Proposed for accuracy, Chair.
Thank you. Happy. So it's been proposed that we happy to accept. Any objections to that? No, that's fine. So I'll sign those in a moment. Any other points in relation to the minutes? No. I will make a point and thank you for the minutes, and I'm going to make a point in a minute when we're talking about our future work programme. The level of detail that's there is comforting, and it helps to stop any issues or problems coming forward. So a note of thanks to that. Item 4 of our agenda, public question times. I'm not aware of any, and there aren't. So there we go for that. So we come to item 5 of our agenda, which is our work programme. And so just a couple of points. So for those new members to the committee, we are on page 23. And going forward, so the way that generally that it works for us, we have agendas as we see them, and then obviously for hopefully the next meeting and the following meeting after, items that we may want to look at or issues of concern or interest are there. The work plan is clear of areas to cover. One of the things that I do say, and both the Vice Chair and myself are very clear, members are our eyes and ears. We can't be everywhere to hear everything and see everything. And it's helpful if members are able to, if they have an issue or a point, identify those so that we can look at them, or if they think that the committee may want to look at something. In the same way, what I ask people, don't wait till this meeting. If members or anyone has a point, email us. We'll be more than happy to consider that, because there are some time critical issues that would work. So that's the way that works. Then as we go through the meeting, we get moving on. We've got the outcome tracker. It's one of the things that I introduced probably a couple of 3 years ago now. We find that during meetings, we make some decisions or comments that may not warrant minuting, but they could do with catching up. And it's also an aid reminder. So so that we could, if something, we're going to look at this again in 6 months' time, or we want some feedback from this. It goes on the outcome tracker. It gets assigned a responsible person, an officer, and a time scale. And then we do the red, amber, green. So amber is put along. The green ones, once they become green and been dealt with at that meeting, they then drop off the bottom, so that then the ambers and reds are there to continue. So it helps us keep in contact and aware of where we're going for it. Bit that I like is that on page 33 that we've added in is a list of things of topics that we've looked at. And I think that that our committee over the last year has worked really well to do things, and hopefully going forward we're going to be building on that. So again, one of the things that we look at is for us to be able to move forward. So just to let members know, so between the last meeting and this meeting, we had a couple of, the chair and vice chair have had a couple of meetings with different officers and different to talk about the future. And what we've agreed is that in the next couple of weeks we'll have a meeting to map out to see where we're going. One of the things we're going to talk about today is the education subgroup, which hopefully will be covering some of the small points that means that we should generate some time for more topics in this meeting. Members, any points, issues or comments in relation to our work programme? I know for a lot of you it's new, so it's worth explaining just so you can see where you're. And the other bit that I like to remind members of is the executive's forward plan. Most of the, well, a good night, well, all decisions should be advertised there in advance of them being taken. There are some exceptions to that, so 99.9, but it's a good aid memoir for what we might want to be looking at. So it gives us forewarning of decisions of executive or above, and it's at that point we might want to think to ourselves that we should be able to do it. But what I will say is, because of the way that the constitution is set up, if a decision is in relation to your ward or division, you should be contacted about that before the decision is made. One of the things that I've harped on about as we were going forward with the constitution was the fact that some of the reason why we don't have too many call-ins in this council is because the decision-making process before the decision is taken should allow most of the issues to be dealt with. It only becomes an exception when things are introduced at the last minute, or members may feel that the decision maker may not have had all the information available to them at the time of taking the decision. So I think our decision maker process is robust, and for members that now that we've become one council, there will be, I'm afraid, more of these emails coming in saying, can you please look at this and see what you're doing? But it's a matter of finding a way to check them, to keep on top of it if you can. But I know that our officers are kind enough to chase those appropriately where the decision is required. Their input is fed in.
So I noticed on the work plan there's a couple of workshops to be scheduled. Have we had any updates on those at all? Thank
you. So just for clarity for those new members, so previously this committee met 10 times a year. The new constitution and the new setup has changed that slightly, but one of the things that we're hoping to be able to do, so we've got 6 scheduled meetings in a year, but I've already said that's not going to be enough for us to do our business. But there's an understanding from our scrutiny manager and his team that there will be a need for other meetings, and one of the examples is rightly so. There are overlaps that are apparent. So children and families also has bits of adult health or health in relation to it, and the example I always give is everyone's favourite at the moment, dentistry. That overlaps both. So there are times, and mental health is another one that's always brought up. So one of the things that we will be looking to do is schedule a couple, at least 1 or 2 joint meetings where the Adults and Health Committee and the Children and Family Committee may come together to talk about it. And that will be discussed when our scrutiny manager, when the chairs of all of the scrutiny committees, chairs and vice chairs, come together for the what are we called in that committee? The chairs committee, or
sort of the informal 6th
overview committee, or yeah. So that will be one of the things. So to answer your question, it is on the to-do list, because one of the things, again, the areas that this committee covers are very vast. And I'm just conscious as well that some of the constitution hasn't dug down into some of the areas. So it's things that also we'd like to sort out is what reports, what council business should always come to this committee, what could come to this committee, and what we might want to look at. That way we'd be able to have an idea of what we should be looking at and what we may want to the future. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other points or comments for our work programme? Okay, thank you, members. So item 6 of our agenda, LA maintains schools core offer, update and response from the last meeting. I'll introduce Amelia in a moment, but just for some clarity, the last couple of meetings we've had a lot extensively about the core offer and how Somerset Council's business model is changing slightly. It's a considerable change in some cases. When it first came to the committee, one of the things that we made quite clear in our response was that schools should not be dramatically financially impacted by the implications of this. The officers have been working very hard to communicate with schools and make sure that they understand the process. Obviously, the process has now come into action, so there is more. So we've asked for an update to be provided for us, and Amelia is going to do that. So thank you, Amelia. If you could introduce yourself to those new members as well, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Amelia Walker. I'm the Service Director for Education, Partnerships and Skills, one of the 4 service directors in Children Services. And I was trying to be helpful and put up a set of slides just to guide us through the conversation and provide a brief overview. You have had the papers in advance, but sometimes it's helpful just to do a brief recap. I did then unhelpfully put up the wrong set of slides, so if you will bear with me momentarily, I'll put those up on the slide deck for us. Can I just check that everyone has had sight of the, there should be 3 papers that you've had with the education items, an update on the core offer, a new booklet for your information, which summarises that, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment, and our next item has an attached paper as well. So just by way of background, and I think one of the things that is always most helpful in the way that Lee leads the committee is to encourage us to make sure that we all are starting from the same position in terms of our understanding. So I do apologise if any of this is very evident to you, but I know we have some new members to the committee. We have 133 LA maintained schools, I think, at this moment in time. That means we are a direct split down the county between LA maintained schools and academies, 269 state-funded schools in total. And the core offer is a new bundled package of services, which is how the council supports its LA maintained schools. We do also support academies. We have a trading relationship with virtually every academy and single academy trust or multi-academy trust in the county, as well as a number of other educational institutions outside of Somerset. But we have a particular responsibility to our local authority maintained schools. We are statutorily accountable for their performance. The focus of this is not just change for change's sake. We've discussed previously in this committee, there is an urgent and pressing need to raise educational standards in the county. And as we have particular responsibility to our local authority maintained schools, we need to know that the support we are providing is as good as it can be. And so this has been a very important exercise to put us on a sound, firm footing for the way forward. We put out the first version of the offer in January. I think that we had a range of feedback, actually summarised in the paper for you. And I think a lot of positivity about the relationship with the local authority, about the value that they have for services, but there was one overriding message, which was we cannot afford it. And so we went back to the drawing table. We worked collaboratively with school leaders, and we came back with a new offer. And the feedback was that the new offer was acceptable. They weren't delighted because it was more money. But there was agreement that the rationale for the increase was understood and was fair. It was a fair division of costs. So that is now being implemented. Current position, it went live on the 1st of April on the same date. This is a trading relationship with the new council. And we anticipate, I think at the moment in time, I won't give you the precise number of schools who haven't pressed the final button because it is extremely small. And I wouldn't want them to feel under inordinate pressure because I think they would know who they were. But we are effectively the deal is basically complete. But that's not the end of the story by any means. We have made commitments to change our practices, and what has been hugely valuable through the process is that we have heard the message loud and clear that this must be about doing with, not doing to. And we are putting things in place to embed that principle of doing with, not doing to, which is a principle for the council embraces as a whole. But making that real, and that will be something that we work on quickly. And we're doing some things immediately, but will be something we continue to focus on, I imagine, for many, many years. And we're also making improvements to services where we've had feedback that the experience hasn't been positive, or there have been gaps or issues. And I would say that that's not just something that was a responsibility for services who report into me, because a number of the critical services that schools rely on sit in other parts of the local authority. So that's a collective responsibility and one of the things that came through very clearly is that within the local authorities, sometimes there has been an us and them. That's not us, that's them. But for schools, there is only one local authority. And if the service comes from the local authority, it comes from us, and they expect it to be consistent. What has also come through this process, obviously we have a lot of debate, and including around this table, about affordability. And we brought the cost down as far as well as humanly possible. But what emerged from that conversation is that there is a wider concern about the position of school finances. You may or may not be aware there was considerable debate in October, November time last year, where a number of school leaders on the national stage, including a number of leaders of multi-academy trusts, said that there was a real risk that their organizations would no longer be a going concern in the near future. And those risks have not gone away. If anything, they are escalating. So there is a national picture about the school situation, but it's hugely variable. And nationally, there are billions of pounds sitting in school balance sheets, but it is hugely dependent and very unevenly spread. So there are pockets of the education system that are sitting on a lot of money, and other schools that are in dire straits, and it's very difficult to spread that money around. The sharp inflationary rises have made this acute in a number of areas, and essentially building on pre-existing challenges. So what we've done is we established 4 working parties made up, this is again the principle of doing with, 4 working parties made up of school leaders and and the working parties are made up of school leaders and council staff, and we're just approached the audit team for support with this to analyse the budgetary position and to better understand it. There's 2 potential benefits. Firstly, that we'll be able to understand the immediate pressures, but also if this is a way of working that works for us, this is an ongoing practice that we could consider to make us more financially knowledgeable, financially resilient, and to take forward any things that we may wish to consider in future about financial resilience and sustainability. For example, some of the schools we've begun to look at, some of the areas where we've seen that they are above average in terms of similar schools in terms of their expenditure is in the deployment of TAs. Now, there is a lot of very well-evidenced national research about the deployment
Amelia,
of TAs.
sorry, acronym.
Teaching assistants, thank you. Teaching assistants, there's a lot of national data, but we haven't necessarily deployed that across our schools, both for efficiency and for effectiveness in terms of pupil outcomes. So that is something we can take forward, and that group could be potentially helpful in that kind of conversation. And we're liaising nationally with representative organisations and other local authorities. So the focus for the coming term, as I said, focusing on service improvements and changes to accountability. And one of the things we've committed to do is to bring in service standards. Some of our individual services may have those, but we haven't got a comprehensive negotiated view of what good service looks like, that we can hold our teams to account, that schools can hold us to account, and that is transparent and visible. We have already recruited a number of strong head teachers, and we have had a fantastic response to that, about having a cadre of our best leaders who have a track record of school improvement to work alongside us to support other schools. And the response to that has been fantastic. And we are instituting new head teacher briefings. The first one was last week. And the focus for this term is on compliance. And we've talked about some of the risks around compliance that we have identified in our schools. And I think there is a real joint enterprise that we are all very sharp and clear on what the minimum looks like and what support is available for any school that has a lower level of confidence that they're meeting minimum standards in any area. We've also shared with you the revised core offer booklet. I think if you look at that, you will see that the extent of the support that is available to schools is very, very broad. Some of the things in the booklet are new, and we will be continuing to look and work with schools on what they need, on what's useful and what's essential and what could be improved. But the process itself, I think, has engendered a degree of transparency, both about what we do, what they can expect, but also who pays for what. And it's a really important point that we have not been clear enough about up to this point. And that became very, very transparent in the first part of this year. That it was opaque, and that was opaque not just to schools, but to us within the local authority, but where the money was coming in and what it was being used for. As you'll see in that booklet, that it spells out very, very clearly what schools pay for and what the local authority pays for, because obviously that makes a difference in terms of accountability and in terms of decision making. I'll stop there. There is obviously further background information in the brief. I'm very happy to take questions on anything relating to the core offer.
Thank you for that. There's some interesting numbers there. I mean, it relates to the bit that 50% of the schools are now still 50% are still under LA organisation, but it helps that helps clarify where we are. In my opinion, we should have more still, but it is where we are. That's a separate discussion. So members, so just for some clarity, so our core offer, for those who don't realise, it's the things that the schools do normally. It is just and it's just how and who pays it. The transparency is there as to what it is and where it goes. I'll start off with one. So there was a lot of surprise by a number of schools, despite the way that it was announced. You seem to indicate that that's has gone down a bit. So the majority of schools are content going forward. Where are we in relation to the level of frustration within the schools?
Well, certainly, I mean, you'll appreciate, and we will all have the experience, you know, in relation to our the people that we work with. When people are unhappy, you generally know, because they tell you and they keep telling you. So in that regard, I cannot promise you that everyone in the school system is very happy right now. There are lots of pressures in education, but it has gone very quiet. And that doesn't mean that we all just go back to business as usual. You know, what we have seen through this process is a renegotiation of the relationship. And, you know, on your point about academization, I have to be very transparent. This has been a trigger, and it will be a trigger for some schools to say, now is the time for us to academize. And that's not a bad thing, because actually there have been a number of schools who've been sitting on the fence, and they've been toying with the idea, and that has probably been a distraction. And actually, if the time has come for them to be decisive and say, okay, we've intended to do this and we're going to do it now, what that means is that schools remaining with the local authority are doing so through a positive choice. It's not a hemming or a hawing or a discomfort with that arrangement. And I think the decisiveness of schools who clearly choose that local authority place and say, this is where we want to be now, and we all work to make that as strong as possible, and those who've been toying with academisation make that choice, and we facilitate that rapidly, will be good for the system, and will make it stronger going forward. But this will and has provoked some schools to firm up something that they had been previously considering.
I'll just caveat that from the chair by saying that schools, the academisation should be a choice for the school. It should be for the best outcome for the pupils and that go there. And some of there are some arguments which I won't get into about why some schools have gone one way, why some haven't. But I would hope that they were able to make that decision and not feel forced into it because of this. But I won't go into that one. And anyway, just before I bring in, so I've got 3 members so far to add to it. Just it would be wrong with me if I didn't do my advert now while I was doing it about being a governor for a school. Members, we've got 110 councillors now in this council, and I would hope that that being a governor for one of those councillors' local schools is something that they're considering. It's a wonderful opportunity to understand what goes on in the schools that you are part of, your community, and it's easy to be done. That there are a number of vacancies around, and I'm pretty certain that there won't be many schools that turn around and willing volunteer to be a governor if someone was to step forward. So there are a number of ways that if members are interested, have a slight interest, then please make your own contact with your school. You can go through our services, any of the officers, or both within our education team, Democratic Services, and myself and the Vice Chair would be happy to signpost you if that is an interest of yours. A lot of us are governors in one level or another, and it really is interesting. And there's the Governor Services, which is part of the SSE as well. You waved at me then. I mean, did you want to come in, or was? Yeah. So again, it would be wrong if I didn't advertise the fact that being a governor of your local school is very rewarding and helps you understand the process as well that the young people are going through.
I think I just wanted to pick up on that point and absolutely endorse it completely, but also to draw people's attention on that point to paragraph 7 in the briefing note, because as you flagged, Lee, it is very important to our remaining LA maintained schools that they know and that they see that evidence that the local authority wants them to remain. And I think that was something that came through the debate, was that schools were asking the question, are you trying to get rid of us? Do you want us to academise because you don't want us anymore? And we were very clear that if a school makes a free and open choice to academise, we will absolutely support that. But we want our schools to remain when that's the thing that they want to. And we want them to flourish, and we want to support them. And so I think the exemplification of the support of the council is important to our schools. And that's not just the quality of support that we provide, but also things like our councillors participating in things like the life of the school and governance. I know we have a number of governors around this table, and our school system would not flourish without the support that they've had through the years. But that any of those means of demonstrating our care and our appreciation for our LA maintained schools is very important.
Thank you. Okay, back onto this. So I've got Andy, Ruth, Martin, and John. So Councillor Dingwall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the briefing. Just reflecting back, my head's feedback very much mirrors what you were saying. Very rocky to start with, but recent meetings have been very, very productive, and communications improved a lot. So I just wanted to pass that on. I had a couple of questions particularly around the KPIs, around how you know you're delivering good service. So they're not formed just yet. So forgive me, this might meander a little bit. The first question is, when will the sign-ups or the confirmation that schools will continue into a second year with the core offer begin? So is that another kind of January to April 2024? At what point will you have your KPIs signed off? And then what time does that leave for you guys to convince the schools that you have met and have plans where you're not meeting the KPIs that you've set? My worry is you're going to potentially, this term will be spent setting the KPIs, and then we've got September to December term, which may be the only term that you can meet the KPIs before starting to encourage schools to sign up for year 2. My other challenge there is I'm not 100% convinced at this stage that it's an active positive choice today to go with, because there's a restriction on the number of schools that can go from local authority maintained to academisation, and so at what point is that something that's going to change? Will more schools be able to, if they apply to go for that? And at what point do we hit a threshold where the core offer is no longer affordable because schools have taken this year to apply and become academies? I'm hoping that all made sense. It meandered around the point a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, very, very good questions. So in relation to the core offer next year, and on the principle of doing with, not doing to, we are expecting that to be an ongoing conversation. So we would not out of the blue land, and I think that the offer didn't land out of the blue, but many people just hadn't engaged, and so it came as a shock. So it's really important that now, and I think it's in people's minds very much, that the core offer is a thing, and therefore we'll need to have that conversation over a period of time. So by the time it formally lands with them, that is the end of the conversation, not the beginning, and that timeline would be the same. So it would land in January, but that would not be the first time that people have had that conversation. And again, I think when we talk about the KPIs, the feedback that we've had has been, it's the lived experience of engaging with the local authority that has the biggest impact. So something like the relationship, particularly with the new education relationship manager, is really critical. And we will put KPIs around it, but it's that personal engagement and what happened on that day in June when something, and I got and Kate was brilliant, that kind of thing. KPIs are almost a backstop for some of the day-to-day transactions, but it's those things that make a difference. And we know that it's the lack of relationships and having trusted people who are a real person, who are in your office when it all kicks off. That's the thing that people haven't had, and it's what they need. So I think that, we will put in work to put in the service standards, and, that, as you say, there, that won't all be there from day one, but it's the same, it's the same as in any of our working relationships. We don't leave because of the performance of organization. We leave because of the relationship with our boss.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. My worry is the decision to go with an academy rather than maintain schools isn't just one made by the team working day to day in the school. The board of governors would be involved as well, and the governors won't necessarily have a relationship with you. And so the very first question I would ask is to the head would be, how are they performing? Show me some numbers. That day-to-day relationship isn't, I'm not going to have experienced that. So that's just a worry for me there.
Thank you.
I understand that. And so just on the point around on academisation, because you have some other points on that as well. I do think that there is a relationship for governors as well, and there is a new chairs forum, and we'll be putting in more communication for governors and governing bodies, because it is about, yes, it is about the numbers, but it's about relationships for everyone as well. So, you know, I think we need to bear that in mind in what we do going forward. In terms of the restrictions on the numbers of academising, you're absolutely right. There is a limit on how many schools can academise at once, and we have a bottleneck. And I think we all need to be very clear. There are schools who do not have a choice about academisation, and that is not because of us. It is because of the law, and it's because of the choices of the regional's director, which is a school goes into inadequate or gets 2 RI judgments, they are eligible for forced academisation. As a directive academy order, and we have a number of directive academy orders. So the decline in standards in the county over many years means we have a backlog of schools in very, very challenging circumstances. Now that's creating pressure in the system. We've also had a backlog because a number of schools intended to academise, but for various reasons put that off for other things going on. So that has built up a backlog, both due to standards and due to some of the schools who have waited before making that decision. So at this moment in time, we have a queue. But what we're working on with the Department for Education and the diocese, in fact, we're talking about it only this week, is making that much more transparent to the system so that everyone can see who is due to academise when, and can make their decision making in a timely manner. Now, the question about affordability is very material there, because we know it is absolutely possible to support a tiny number of schools totally economically. Because we have multi-academy trusts that have 2 schools. We have federations that have 2 schools. And the scale, 133, is larger than any multi-academy trust in the country. So it's not about the number of schools, it's about the volatility. And what has happened in the past is that academisation has happened in a very, very short space of time. And that is a budgetary nightmare, because you set your budget and suddenly you have a chunk of money that is disappearing mid-year. So what we are saying is, going forward, there needs to be a clear point in the financial annual cycle when schools notify of their intention to academise, so that that can be planned for. Because it's not the number, it's about the ability to plan long term. And so that conversation will provide both stability for schools, because it'll be transparent what academisation looks like across the county. They will know when their decision making must take place, and then everyone will be able to plan financially with the long term.
Thank you. Okay, members, concise questions, please. Happy for making your points, but we're already starting to. But Ruth.
Okay, I've got a few. Do you want me to do one at a time? So that's probably easier, isn't it? So my first one is that you made it very clear at previous scrutiny meetings that for this to work with the core offer, all schools have to sign up, that LA maintained. Now you've stated, and I appreciate you can't give us numbers, that not everybody's pushed the button, in your words. So what's that risk if those do not sign up to this? So that's my first question.
I would say the number is so small. It's very small, minute, microscopic.
That's fine. We won't put any more pressure on Amelia. The other question is the budgets. So multiple schools, because obviously being a governor, I've speak to other governors, multiple schools did not have their budgets signed off very quickly this year. There were a lot of issues. How much of an impact did that have on schools being able to agree, not agree to the core offer?
So that's as indicated part of the wider issue around the financial picture, and that's not just Somerset now. That's a much bigger national issue around affordability and the national funding formula this year. I would need to go back and check with my colleagues about the where we were in clarifying what the position was, but it's not going to be. I think we're not in a position to do the ordinary. You put in a deficit, you do a recovery plan, reset, etc. That's not going to work with the scale of issues that are emerging, which is why we put the working parties in place. I would need to come back to you to confirm what communications have gone out in relation to schools. It hasn't stopped people agreeing the core offer, because we've given them assurances that there's a wider process going on. but obviously the usual process around recovery budgets is not one that's appropriate this year.
Okay, so, and then my next one is around under proposals, actions and next steps, point 9. You talk around the fact that you're recruiting head teachers and governors. How is that recruitment taking place?
I believe head teachers were emailed and asked if they wanted to volunteer, but that's a rolling process, so that's not closed. That was a first tranche of expressions of interest to participate.
Governors?
I do not believe we have generally recruited governors yet. We've only recruited governors for the finance working parties, but again, that's a rolling programme. So we're starting with finance and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you. And my last comment, we covered the academisation brilliantly, well done, so I don't have to ask that one now. But just around the relationship manager with schools, I have to say ours is absolutely amazing. She is brilliant. I cannot sing her praises high enough. And if as a governor you haven't built a relationship with your relationship manager, then I would suggest that you do that, because they are very, very effective. Well, ours is very effective, let's say that.
Thank you, Ruth, for the comments and questions, and thank you for Amelia. So next up, Martin, Councillor Lovell, sir.
Thank you. Actually, my point has virtually been covered by Ruth's last question, but I just wanted to home in a little bit on that role, because you didn't actually mention it in the presentation. It's only come up, this is a relationship manager, come up in the questions. Wonderful to hear the positive feedback, but the thing that hits me is four managers over 133 schools is quite thinly spread. Could we understand a bit more about the role and the sort of people you're recruiting to them and their experience, so that we have the confidence that these people have got real value to add? Thank you.
So we have four, as you say, we've got 4 relationship managers. They come from a range of backgrounds. I believe, just running through, every single one of them was previously a local authority employee in a range of roles, all educational. So what's fantastic about them as a team, and they very much work as a team, is that they each have quite deep sector knowledge in a different part of education. And so that complementarity helps. I think the thing that I would say about every single one of them as individuals is that they are incredibly motivated, they're very personable, and they're very self-starting. And the role that we specified was a very general one. It was to get out, to build a relationship, and to sort the problem, whatever the problem is, and to not be the expert. Because one of the things we have a lot of experience with in education is that you have people who waft in as experts and they tell you what to do and they waft away. I use that under advisement, but in the history we've had this experience in education. There've obviously been some advisors in the history who've been brilliant, but quite often what our schools need is they need people who are connectors. So they connect them to the experts, they connect them to the source of help, but also that they have the flexibility to be able to say, whatever it is, I'll hold that problem with you and stay with you until we've sorted it. And I guess one of the things we've experienced is that the system became very fragmented and people just didn't know. And sometimes it's even the tiniest thing. There's just a niggle. Running a school is very, very difficult. As a leader, whether that's a head teacher or a governor, I need to be able to tap into the complexity of the system and get a solution quickly. And that person is just a facilitator. They are glue, they are grease in the wheels, and they just get things going. And so far, the feedback we've had, and thank you, Ruth, for echoing that, has been that is exactly what they're doing, and it's really making a difference.
Thank you. John, Councillor Hunt, please.
Thank you, Chair, and a very happy Star Wars Day to you, sir. Amelia, first of all, huge thank you for your advice at the last meeting about the budget situation at the school, of which I'm a governor. It helped them immensely, so they were very relieved to receive that. In terms of, certainly I can only speak for the school I'm a governor of and others that I know about, but it seems to me that much of the financial pressure at the moment is based on, and we don't know the numbers at the moment, is where there are new staff pay awards, which of course the brunt of that is being borne by the local authority schools involved with that, which is a problem. And I don't know whether there is something we as a council can help with that. I appreciate it's a government, central government thing on that. I'll move forward because that's just a sort of a thought, really. In terms of the academies themselves, I'm assuming, because there's very likely to be a change in government. I think I may have asked this before, but there is likely to be a change in government, and I would suggest autumn of next year. But from what I gather, and you may be able to answer this, Chair, actually the Labour Party at the moment have I don't believe, like academies. So I'm not certain quite where that would stand. It's more of an expression of that, and perhaps if the Chair could perhaps answer that one in a moment. And in terms of the actual pressures on schools, back to the School I'm a Governor at, just a brief example, the PTA there have struggled to raise money, as have they all over the last few years because of COVID. They are actually running a May fair this year, which is great, and the anticipated income from it is around 4,000, weather permitting, which would be great news. Previously at the school, it was always, oh, what lovely things can we get to add to the school and the fun of the children, etc. But now, of course, that money is now looked at as a more helping the school to on its budget, if you like, and it just seems a bit uncomfortable that it has to be self-raised in that way. And back to academies, you mentioned the underperforming schools, which is something I know nothing about this. So where the school is underperforming, they can be forced into an academy situation. We have a queue of those, you said. All I know about academies, our particular school has been interviewed, if you like, by a couple of local academies. And it's almost as if, do they want us or do they not? I personally don't think we should go academy, but that's my own view. But with these others where they have to academise because of their underperformance, why would another academy want to take them on if they're underperforming is a question. Or do we just form ourselves as a council? Are we permitted to perform that to create an academy for the underperforming schools and actually run it, guide it ourselves? I'm rather confused by that. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I'll do the first. I go out of my way to be non-political, so we can have a conversation outside of this meeting as to what would happen, and the political response would be, well, a general election will come before the end of the term, and the next term finishes the next term, as in government term, finishes. I think it has been before. I think January, announced before November 2024. So it will be sometime soon. Amelia.
Yeah, so in relation to the pressures on budgets, you're absolutely right. The pay award has a significant impact and was not fully funded. But also there are pressures, as we've all experienced, from utilities, which have shot up extraordinarily. If there are any sometimes capital and premises costs, support, including our own, and reductions in income or income below inflation, including some grants. So there are, in the same way we've seen in the local authority, inflation hits in a number of areas. It's precisely the same impact that's being felt across schools, but it doesn't hit uniformly, and that's why we're seeing variations in that as well. And the national funding formula itself is extremely complicated, so the way that the income impacts on different schools is variable as well. That's why we're doing this primarily evaluation exercise to get underneath it. In relation to academisation, you're right, the decision around a trust and a school relationship is a mutual one. The school has to want it if it's voluntary, and the trust needs to want the school as well. And it is by no means assured that there is a trust who wants every school. And we've certainly been in a situation where there have been schools that no trust would touch. In fact, I think there's an acronym nationally, schools nobody wants. The SNOWS. Which is a very uncomfortable place for any school to be, particularly if that school is both very, very small or financially unstable and underperforming. And that's a very difficult situation. There are incentives for trusts, financial, sometimes quite significant incentives to take underperforming schools. But it is a difficult situation. And we know in Somerset that we have some fantastic trusts. Academisation sometimes works brilliantly, and we have some absolutely wonderful trusts with great leaders. We also have some failing trusts and some trusts in very difficult circumstances with some very difficult inspection outcomes. And to be clear, they can force local authority schools to academise. They can also take schools, and I say they, the Department for Education, can take academies off a trust and put them into another trust. And as much as it's difficult for an LA maintained school to be forcibly rebrokered, it is equally difficult for a trust to have a school forcibly removed. And some of those conversations are underway in the county right now. So underperformance across the county is affecting the system in many ways, and it's not comfortable. So I think that's that.
Thank you. If you're quick, 'cause I'm already behind and
Sorry,
James is
Chair.
going to be telling me off.
Just a very brief one, a question I forgot to ask, actually. In terms of schools, LA schools that have large funds available, so a good backup, if you like, can they be asked to spread that money around? Because at the end of the day, it is all our money, as it were. Can they be forced by us as a council to, in a nice way, obviously, say, look, we need to share this money around a bit now? So is that a possibility as well?
We do have the, and I think you asked previously, which I didn't touch on, could we support schools financially? By law, the local authority cannot provide additional funding to local authority maintained schools from local authority funds. That's not permitted. In terms of spreading surplus balances around, it is permitted to have a clawback scheme for balances above a certain level. I can tell you that is extraordinarily controversial. And given the controversy financial conversations we've just been having, I would be, if directed so, we would have that conversation. But I think, my advice would be tread very carefully in this space. I don't know of any school that builds up a large balance for no good reason. It's generally because there is a capital project that they have been planning for a very, very long time. And to take that, something that they have built up at great pain and spread it across the system is a very difficult conversation, which I wouldn't necessarily want to embark on.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring Ruth in for one quick question, and I'm going to look to move on.
Very quick question. You mentioned earlier around learning support assistants, teacher assistants as they used to be called, and the fact that we have issues locally with that, with recruitment. We just don't have enough to go around in reality. So is there any plans to look at that and at how we are using our learning support system across the system to try and address that? Because I'm conscious that a lot of schools are saying that, for example, it's in a EHCP plan that the child needs to have a one-to-one, but they can't actually, education, health and care plan. But they can't recruit to those positions. So obviously we need to address that. And as research has obviously clearly shown, it's not appropriate for any child to have a teaching assistant stuck to them permanently. So what's the plan?
So we haven't got a formulated plan as yet. But we know that Bristol, for example, Bristol City Council recently undertook a large project which was supported by Somerset's teaching school around the deployment of learning support assistants, teaching assistants. So I intend to have a conversation with them. And my understand from engagement with some Bristol schools is that that's been a really effective piece of work. It's been, revolutionary in some schools. So, they're our next door neighbours, and we'll be certainly having a conversation with them.
Thank you, and I apologise, but I missed Francis, so Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's quite a quick one. It's about it follows on from your John on reserves. Some schools have built up quite large reserves. Circumstances change. They may not. The projects they might have been built up for may no longer be there. How much in terms of the base, the core offer of the base package, are you able to I hope ensure schools don't just burn them by not making the changes that they need to do, because I'm aware of one school which has burnt an awful lot of money by not reorganising by thinking it might reorganise, and then instead of doing so, getting rid of a permanent teacher and employing a supply instead. So burnt the reserve, which means that at the end of that year, they're stuffed. That's the sort of worry I have over some of our schools.
So the working parties that we are in the process of setting up, that's absolutely the intention, is that we undertake a benchmarking exercise across all schools. The government has online provided a huge amount of what is now really quite high quality benchmarking information. And we plan to do a quick and dirty comparison and then use that as a basis for more root and branch examination of areas of potential savings. So that would be, as Ruth has indicated, opportunity to look at learning support assistance, but also other things, staffing structures, back office structures, the use of leadership time. There's not an infinite number of ways that you can reorganize your budget, but we know that not all of our schools are running at maximum efficiency. Now, sometimes that inefficiency is for very good reason. It's for an educational reason. We would support that. And sometimes it could be done another way. But sometimes that support would need to come from outside the school to make that change and to facilitate that. We have the capacity to do that. We would need to prioritise and identify the quick wins and the bigger, meatier projects. But that's absolutely the intention.
Thank you, members, for that. Thank you. It's just to note for now, I suppose, and we've talked around the subject quite ingested, but I would suggest if anyone has any members have questions, and they can direct them through. But in the same way, it's worth getting below the line there, so you can understand what's going on. Getting back to schools is important. Getting into schools is an important thing. Thank you for that. What I will say, though, I think, because this is a developing picture, I'm sure members would be interested in maybe in 6 months' time having an update if it's not already been dealt with before then for the committee. So we'll make a note of that. Okay. Item 7 of our agenda, then hopefully we might be able to make a bit of time, because this is something that we've spoken about at the last meeting. So item 7 is the proposed steering group or a task group. So it's not a task and finish group, it's something that we're looking at. But Amelia, you were going to, or Tessa, were you was that a picture because you wanted to introduce that, or are you happy? No, that's fine. I saw you come in the picture, so thank you. Amelia again.
Thank you. Can I just apologise? I think the draft document that you have had shared looks correct apart from the name of the group, which says Best Start in Life Steering Group. That's because we have a Best Start in Life Steering Group, and I believe none of us spotted that that's been left in as the name. The intention is that this is the Subcommittee on Education Standards. It's not the Best Start in Life Steering Group. I was very puzzled by that. I thought we'd just given you the wrong document. It's just got the wrong name of the subcommittee. If I can just draw your attention to the purpose, I believe we had a recent exchange about performance data at this committee in prior meetings. The performance data around schools, around the position of Somerset schools, is very complex. There are so many numbers in education, and it can be a life's work to fully understand them all. It would swamp the work of this committee were we to spend as much time as it really deserves wading through the performance data. So intention is for the subcommittee to have a focus on getting to grips with the performance data in all its guises, and to then summarise the findings back to this committee in relation to strengths, trends and areas of concern. But also we've touched on the question around the performance of the LA maintained and the academised system. Obviously, if you wish to challenge me or my colleagues around the performance of the LA maintained system, I'm here and you may do so. If you have questions and you would like to challenge the performance of the academised system, at the moment your levers to do so as a committee are not strong. And so the intention is that there would be a subcommittee where there could be those conversations where an initial discussion about the effectiveness of the interventions could take place. That is not a public meeting, because you may wish to have those conversations in a way that is not so confrontational, perhaps, or so exposing if we're talking about underperformance. And they may very much welcome the opportunity to talk to members of this committee in a subcommittee environment. But also, we are proposing to create an independent complaints panel. We've undertaken a piece of work around complaints and concerns in the system. If you are any of you governors, you will be aware that complaints can be a very time-consuming, messy, and difficult business. What we are aware of is that currently, if there is a complaint that goes to the highest stage in the local authority system, which is stage 3, it goes to the governing body. For parents, that can sometimes feel insufficiently independent. And what we're proposing to do is for complaints where a governing body feels that that would feel insufficiently independent for the parent or for the governing body, that they would have access to an independent complaints panel who could undertake stage 3 on their behalf, made up of governors from across the county. And potentially that would be something that we would open up to the academised system as well, because they will experience the same issue. There can also be a burden on governor capacity, because finding enough governors, some of our governing bodies are quite small, with the time to undertake it, which can be quite taxing, is something that if we do have some absolutely fantastic governors who have more time, and also some who have professional backgrounds which are particularly relevant to this area, and will be prepared to do this on behalf of the county. So, but the idea is that there may be issues, broader systemic issues that arise from that panel that they would like to escalate, and the subcommittee could be a place we're proposing that they could escalate that to, where there's broader lessons to be learned for the system.
Thank you. I mean, it's an exciting opportunity. One of the things that we made reference to in our forward work planner, there are lots of things that we would like to. It's just the realistic time of the committee have, and this is an exciting opportunity for some. I know that he's not in the room, but I've already volunteered my vice chair to chair this particular body, and with his education background, he is looking forward to that as well. So just for clarity, so at the moment we're just the decision is whether we think it's a good idea and to move it forward. Secondly, to then, I won't necessarily ask people in the room at this meeting if you put your hand up to volunteer, but we would look for members of the committee to do so if you felt able to. In the same way as I don't think I would limit, because we've got 110 councillors and the workload, I wouldn't just limit to members of this committee. If there were interested members outside of that, then I would offer them that opportunity, because we're saying 3 to 5. But in the same way, the meetings, although they're not public meetings for this sub panel, so this task group, but the meetings will be advertised and members will be able to dip in as well, should they feel, because as I say, there's a broad spectrum there. And as far as terms of referencing, so this is a draft, and obviously at the first meeting of that body, they would then put their terms of reference and anything else together, and it will be evolving as well. Hopefully, one of the things that this group will be able to do is to develop their own strategies as well, so that they can be clear and hopefully help us as a buffer for some of the business that would come through. So I'm supportive and would welcome it. And as I say, Oliver's already been volunteered, so that one was there. So members, any points or comments or questions? So are you happy? So Ruth.
Just wanted to make it clear to Scrutiny that the representative from the Parent Carer Forum will be myself, so I will be there in that facility, not in this facility, if that makes sense. And just to say that I welcome that addition around having the complaints process. So as a governor, I've been asked to support small settings, because once the initial one's done, there isn't enough governors to go around to do the next stage. So having something more formal in place will be really helpful, I think.
That's fine. As I say, members, I think so. The consensus is that we support the progress on this. So unless anyone shouts any differently, I will take that as read. What I will ask is, I know that the executive and the assistant executive member are in the room, that perhaps it might be worth, with the full council coming up towards the end of this month, maybe adding a point in relation to that, to say to all the members of council that the opportunity is there for them to join. It would be helpful, and I know full council is the best place to get that sort of advert out. Tessa, are you happy with that? Yeah,
Yes,
so,
absolutely. Thank you.
yeah, so I think that would be a good opportunity, because that will give some members another ability to dip into something else, and I think this is important. In the same way as members, if you are interested, please feel free to drop us an email with an expression of interest, and then we can move it forward by that. I won't put it to the vote, but unless anyone wants to push it, but are we happy that we get there's no discontent in the room? So Amelia, I think that's a go for that one. So, which is good. So thank you for that.
I just wanted to indicate, because I do feel it's come some out of our conversations, Lee, but this has been something that there are various people in the national stage who are quite interested in, because this is relatively innovative, to have a touch point between the local authority in terms of scrutiny and the academised system. So we'll be liaising with the Institute for Government who would like to come down and observe the development of this. So I think well done to all of you for supporting it.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, excellent. So moving on to item 8 of our agenda, just to let members know what we are planning to do at the end of this. I'll take a comfort break that will give us an opportunity to just relax for a moment between the next items. So item 8 of our agenda is the SEND strategy and the accelerated progress plan. I'm to introduce Dr. Rob Hart, who sneaks the doctor in these points, and to introduce it. So Rob, sir. Oh, Tessa.
Yes, I wanted to get my oar in before Rob. Is that all right?
Of course, thank you. Sorry, I missed it. It wasn't on my agenda, so my point. So,
No, that's all right.
Tessa, if you'd
Don't
like to
worry at
introduce
all.
it, I would be
Yes, I'd love
appreciative.
to. Yes, well, I'm sure most of you will be familiar with Rob, but what I wanted to do was just talk about this. So this is our focus on the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Strategy. We're going to use the word SEND, or the acronym SEND, for Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. And this sets out the priorities and the programmes for the next 3 years. And the other document is the Accelerated Progress Plan, which our team will refer to as APP. And that's been developed as a response to the 2 remaining areas of weakness after our 2022 Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission inspection. So both of these plans are partnership plans. So they're jointly owned by the council and the Integrated Care Board, which no doubt will be referred to as ICB. And they're developed in partnership with the education providers and parent carers and other partners. So as you will be familiar with from previous comments that have been made in the previous committee meetings, the 2022 revisit showed that we'd actually made a massive amount of progress, but we don't want to stop there. We're very ambitious to go on further. And so through the end of, well, throughout 2022, we've been focused on what we need to do next after the written statement of action. And that thinking has been ongoing. So we've undertaken a peer review and there's been a new needs assessment and lots of engagement to develop the new strategy. And this will align with our other strategy documents, the things like Connect Somerset and our Education for Life strategy. And all of these lead into developing the council plan. So this strategy that you're seeing today has been approved by the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, and the SEND Partnership, Special Education Needs and Disabilities Partnership. And the Accelerated Progress Plan's been submitted to the Department for Education, awaiting approval. So today, I think the Scrutiny Committee is aware of these in terms of setting out the future actions and priorities. And I know that we're quite keen to come back to the committee in 6 months' time or 12 months' time or both and give progress updates, Lee, if that's all right, so that the committee can go on and challenge and seek some assurance that what we're doing is what we've said we're going to do and it is having impact. So at that point, if I may, I'll hand over to Rob. I suppose I should call him Dr. Rob Hart, but Rob to most of us. Thank you.
Just a quick one. So just for clarity, so to members, we're asked to note the information, the update. So there's no decision. It's more a matter, and what Rob will do is cover the salient points, because obviously the papers have been shared, and do that. So because because this presentation hasn't been shared, has it? Or
presentation hasn't been shared, but so I've got a
paperwork.
few slides that just bring out the key updates. But the SEND strategy document has been shared, and the accelerated progress plan has been shared. And then just the other thing, whilst I'm here in the room, I'd also like to introduce Andrew Keefe, who might want to put his camera on. There we are. Andrew is.
Good morning.
Andrew, do you want to say who you are?
Yes, I'm the Deputy Director of Commissioning at the Somerset ICB.
And as Tessa mentioned, the strategy, all the work we do around special educational needs and disabilities is a partnership approach. It is a partnership between local authority and the Integrated Care Board, responsible for health and care provision, and we're the statutory bodies responsible for that. But it is overseen by our Strategic SEND Partnership Board, which also includes the Parent Carer Forum, who are our strategic partner, as well as partners in schools, other education settings, and other partners across the system. So just think that's really important to put out there from the get-go. So just to kind of give the committee the background. So in 2020, there was a local area inspection of SEND in Somerset, which identified 9 areas of weakness in the way that things were happening. And that led to us having to develop what was called a written statement of action. That was a plan, a 2-year plan about how we address those actions. Throughout the course of that, we've been saying we can't just wait until that comes to the end and then go, what next? So we've spent the last year really in developing a new SEND strategy that has been taking that view about what our next steps will be. And the foundations for that have been undertaking a joint strategic needs assessment. So looking at what the needs are of children and young people with special education needs and disabilities in Somerset, which was published last summer. A lot of engagement, working with the Parent Carer Forum, in learning from listening events and other types of engagement. We invited the Local Government Association in to undertake a peer review, and then we drafted a strategy, had a formal consultation period. I came to this committee back in October and shared that draft strategy as part of the formal consultation period. Alongside that, we then had a revisit from Ofsted and Care Quality Commission in December of last year, and they said we'd made sufficient progress in addressing 7 of those 9 areas of significant weakness. So noted the progress that has been made there that Tessa mentioned at the start, but we do have some remaining, which is where the accelerated progress plan comes in. We've now moved to a point where we formally closed the written statement of action, that we've that piece of work has ceased. And so this is about what's next. And so there are 2 documents, the accelerated progress plan, which is a 12-month action plan that we've been required to submit to the Department for Education to address remaining areas of significant weakness. And then the SEND strategy, which is our 3-year programme for how we want to improve SEND services and outcomes in Somerset. And I should just say about the accelerated progress plan, when this was submitted, I was saying that this had been submitted to the DFE and we were waiting sign off for that. I've actually seen an email today that says the DFE have approved it, and they'll be writing formally to Claire Winter, the DCS, and Jonathan Hickman, the Chief Exec of the Integrated Care Board, to confirm that. So I think it is worth starting from the point of saying, over the course of the written statement of action and the work we've been doing over the last couple of years, it has made a difference, and Ofsted and CQC told us it had made a difference, and they said that we'd work together to resolve differences and tackle widespread weaknesses, and the report that was published in February talked about better working together, involving parent carers in more strategic developments, the spirit of collaboration and trust and support. Also better offer of services, so improvements around our autism pathway, improvements in the availability of special educational provision, improvements in education healthcare plans, and then better access, so that there were improvements in waiting times for various services. But what it also said was there are some areas where we still need to do more, and there are two areas that Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission said we hadn't made sufficient progress. The first of these is around assessment and meeting of need, caused by inconsistent practice, and particularly this is about what goes on for children in schools, saying that in some schools there is good practice when it comes to identifying and meeting need and putting in support at an early stage. In other schools, it's not so good. And also saying that in some of our schools, Senkos don't feel that they've got the time, the resource or influence to implement changes, so that children who've got the lower levels of special education needs, those who don't have an education healthcare plan, too many of them have a poor experience. And then saying that for some children who do have an education healthcare plan, which sets out the provision they're entitled to, not always are they getting what that plan sets out. That the plan says they're entitled to certain levels of support and they're not getting that. And then the other areas that they've said we need to focus on is around inclusive practice in schools, and saying too many children and young people are still not accessing education because of disproportionate use of exclusion and poor inclusive practices. So over the last few years, we've seen Somerset has had high numbers of exclusions from school and suspensions. They've continued to be high, and we see that those disproportionately impact children with special educational needs and disabilities. So those who've got special education needs are more likely to experience exclusion than those who haven't. So we've been asked to put in place an accelerated progress plan around that. So it's a 12-month plan that's been developed through a series of workshops involving local authority services, education providers, school settings, FE, social care, health commissioners and providers, and the Parent Carer Forum. And it was submitted last month. We've gone backwards, forwards, and as I say, they're now in a position to agree it. But underlying this, there are kind of 10 key areas of action, which, and the plan that's been shared with you goes into much greater detail on the stepping stones towards that. But that's about embedding what's called our graduated response tool. So this is guidance for schools around how they support children with SEND. So using training and support schools to really embed that, putting in places so that we're checking up with schools to make sure that provision is being delivered, a program of work to look at where we've got gaps in mental health support and addressing those, focus on reducing times for waiting times for autism assessments, work within social care to strengthen their understanding and identification of need for children with a social worker, targeted work around gaps relating to provision for children with a social, emotional, mental health need, as that's a significant area that we've got gaps in Somerset. Rolling out some core foundational training focused on children's sensory needs and also trauma-informed practice in schools. Some targeted work, and this is very much part of our Education for Life strategy that's focused on a cohort of children who are most at risk of exclusion. Setting up area partnership arrangements that bring schools together with local authority agencies and the voluntary sector to focus on most vulnerable children, and then targeted work with a group of schools. And so those are the kind of actions that we've identified as where we feel they'll make the most difference in terms of addressing those challenges around around identification of children with special educational needs and inclusive practice. What we have to do with that is, and this is all detailed in the plan that's been shared, set out key performance indicators that set out what our performance is now, where we want to get to at 3 months, at 6 months, at 9 months and 12 months. And we will be having quarterly review meetings with the Department for Education where they're checking that we're on track with those things. In order to drive this forward, we've set up a working group who are coordinating this work, and they report into our SEND Partnership Board on a monthly basis. And I'm suggesting that that the Scrutiny Committee should have 6 monthly updates so that you are aware of the work that's going on in that space and the impact that it's having and can provide appropriate challenge. So that's the Accelerated Progress Plan. Then the SEND strategy is running alongside it, and a lot of what's in the Accelerated Progress Plan is also in part of our SEND strategy. But that's setting out the longer term, the next 3 years, and as I mentioned, built on extensive engagement, evaluation, and analysis of data. So underpinning this are some key elements about our kind of vision and aspiration that have come from engagement with parent carers and with children and young people with SEND. And that starts with a vision, and this is taken from a quote from a young person with SEND who talked about wanting to be able to move through the world without having to force their way through it. And we wanting a strategy that's about their life. It's not about our service, and that's kind of key animating idea, because for too many children and young people with a special educational need or disability or their families, too much of their story is one of struggle and having to fight to get recognition, fight to get listened to, having to battle to get services working together. And very much the strategy, the theme underpinning the strategy is, what do we need to do to build confidence and trust so that it doesn't feel like people have to force their way through, and they're able to find their way through. It's also the flower on the screen is something called our outcomes framework that was developed by through co-production with children, young people and their families, and was based on asking, what does a good life look like for children and young people with special education needs and disabilities? And they said the things that are important are being ambitious, being connected and part of a community, being healthy, being informed about choices, being educated, being valued and being employed. And so those are the kind of outcomes we're looking to achieve, and what the strategy then sets out is our priorities, the work areas we're going to focus on to address those. And there are 4 themes that underpin this. 4 themes are working together, and that's both how services worked with each other, because part of that struggle for families is often finding that services aren't talking to one another, aren't working together. But it's also how we work together with families so that they're really front and centre when it comes to decision making and involved in decisions and appropriately informed. It's about getting help as early as possible, so that we have a stronger focus on early identification and children getting the right support at the right level, so that small problems don't become bigger problems. It's then about having access to the right provision at the end. So there's certain areas where we have gaps in provision or we haven't got sufficient provision, particularly around children with social, emotional, mental health needs, also around, we see high numbers of referrals for children for autism assessments, and so we need to make sure that we've got the right support and provision around that. And then it's about preparing for the future. And one of the things I think that came through when the consultation and response to consultation was that there were some areas there where people felt we needed to put in more within the plan. So through the consultation process, there's been more added around that preparing for adulthood, including links to housing and health support going into adulthood. When it comes to getting the right support, there's been a bigger focus on short breaks, but also around wraparound support for schools for children with SEND. And then also when it comes to the engagement, there's a bit more around engagement with children and young people with SEND as well as their families, and a focus on the Unstoppables, which are our group for doing that. I'm not going to talk, I can't, and I'm not intending talking through the whole of the strategy. I'm trusting that people have an opportunity to read it. I think probably the most useful point to kind of leave off on is then how does all this get overseen? And this is contained within the Accelerated Progress Plan, but the way that we take things forward, our work is driven by the SEND Partnership Board, which is a group that Andrew and I co-chair and has got representation from parent carers, school settings and providers, health providers, commissioners and so on. That reports into the Integrated Care System Children and Families Board, which is co-chaired by exec leads for SEND in both organisations, and so reports in regularly. And then that group has a number of subgroups. We have a dedicated subgroup driving forward the Accelerated Progress Plan. We'll have specific subgroups for each part of the SEND strategy, and they will be responsible for driving forward the doing of the work. And then we will also be providing regular reports to this committee and to Health and Wellbeing Board. I appreciate that's quite a rattle of information, but there's a lot in the strategy and the plan to share.
You're right, there's a lot in it, and a lot more. And it's just I'm conscious that this is a to note part for the committee, and so the drilling down of it may not be as detailed as we can, because it is today, but it's massive. And rightly so, because there's a need to cover it. But I looked at it myself, and I was starting to get confused at some elements to it. Well, so I wouldn't be sorry. There's a lot of new members in the room, so I'll take any questions or comments. And sorry, Andrew, did you want to come in? Andrew Keefe, did you want to come in and say anything before I open it up?
No, just to reiterate, I mean, Rob more than eloquently covered quite a vast subject there, and did it, as you would expect, very, very well. The only thing I would sort of emphasise from Rob's already referenced is these are two different documents. It's the Accelerator Plan and the strategy, serving slightly two different purposes. However, there is a lot of overlap between them, and that's a good and a right thing that it is. I think it illustrates that the Accelerator Plan isn't just a tick box exercise for the regulators, Ofsted, Department of Education and CQC. We want to also to do that because it's the right thing to do for the strategy, and the themes within the two documents complement each other, and it does demonstrate as a system we are working together far more collaboratively and in partnership and co-producing these documents in a manner that I don't think we did X number of years ago. So no, I commend the documents and the work that we're doing in this space.
Thank you. Andy, I see that you come in, so just hold it for a second. I just wanted to see if there's any members in the room that wanted to make any points or deal with it first. Ruth, did you want to come in, please? Thank you. I'll come back to you in a second, Andy.
Mine's quite a simple one. As you've already mentioned, Chair, there's quite a lot of new members, and going through the APP, I've noticed there's a lot of programmes and there's a lot of acronyms in there that they may not know. So actually, we might need to just do sort of like a crib sheet to go with it so that members can understand, because there is a lot of detail in there.
Noted. Okay, that's fine. A couple for me before I bring Andy in, just to say, it's a big old area, lots of cover, and KPIs are being monitored by. So, but where does the council or the councillors, where do they sit within all of this in relation to? So, and I suppose the next bit on from that is how will we, or how will the council hold you to account, or in effect, how can this scrutiny committee know and understand where you are with it? So you talk about every 6 months bringing a progress report back. Is that dashboard detail what went wrong? Where? So when we had the Ofsted previously, we were doing self-analysis as well, wasn't it, and stuff like that. Where does that all fit?
Yeah, so there's a lot in there. There are two things, I think. One is that we're developing a scorecard dashboard that will list those kind of key performance indicators and key information, and so we'll be able to summarise that and people will be able to see that. In terms of the strategy overall, the way it's arranged is there are 29 missions, and we will be able to report for each of those missions whether they're on track to be delivered, whether they've been delivered, or whether they've not been delivered. And clearly, then we will be so when we're doing that, you will be able to see which of those missions are on track, which are not on track, and if they're not on track, and then also what the relation to that.
So you'll be holding yourself to account, the different bodies within it, and then reporting to us on progress. Okay. Thank you for that. Andy, I've got one more, but I can wait for a second.
All this,
the microphone's not working, or you're not speaking close enough to it, Andy.
Yeah, no good.
You're not very loud. You're just in the background. I don't know. Give it another try, and we'll see.
Shall I? I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it just didn't. I know that sometimes it plays up. While you're typing, I'll just add a little area specialist, autism. And the autism, where does that fit with the autism strategy?
Andrew, do you want to pick that up?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think is that the autism strategy is in development. I think it's important to not every where a lot of these areas, there's a physical, there's a mental, there's a neurodevelopmental elements to it. Not everybody who may have a diagnosis of autism may well be part of this SEND arena. There's a number of Venn diagrams, let's say. So it is absolutely included. The autism pathway is now established. I think it's important to know there's sort of numerous elements to that. There's a lot of work that can be done pre-diagnostic and should be done pre-diagnostic. There's diagnostics. But one of the key things that we're hearing back very often is you get a diagnosis, but what difference does it actually make? And that's part of this written statement of action, that we're actually making sure that when people do get the education health plan, that it actually is delivered. Just having a document in itself doesn't help. And I think that will go alongside the development of the autism strategy to ensure that it's not just a strategy, it actually results in the delivery and positive outcomes for the young person, children and their families, and supporting the schools more adequately. Okay,
yeah, it's sort of a loaded question, but thank you. I think I got for that, because the last autism strategy we had is out of date now.
Yes.
In effect, we haven't developed a new one yet. That's part of this process.
Yes, it's in development, let's say. But we want it to be more meaningful rather than just a dry document, let's say.
Absolutely, thank you. I see Andy. I can't see what they were Andy's question, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, question was about early intervention and getting help as early as possible. And question is, what age is the child when you start giving help? And I think when we talk about early intervention, it's can both be early in life or early in the life of a problem or issue. And so in terms of our work with around special educational needs and disabilities, this covers birth to 25 years. That's what we're talking about. And in fact, and so we have processes whereby for children who are infants, there are processes for health services such as midwifery and health visitors to notify the local authority when they suspect that a child may have special educational needs, and that informs our planning. And we've got specific early years teams who work around that. So, but you know, for some children, and I think this is certainly something that we've seen post-pandemic, where there are children who are experiencing more emotional issues and mental health issues impacting their engagement in education. They may have very typical development and not have any kind of special educational needs later on. And so part of the focus on early intervention is about being able to pick up those problems when they're smaller problems and get the right support. And that's very much about how we work with schools, because schools and early years settings are the places that see children every day. And so they're the places that can notice differences and can start to, if they follow the right process, can start to assess what's going on and put in place the right support. And that's where our focus is very much around how we empower schools in early years settings to be able to identify early and put in the right.
You okay with that, Andy? I didn't get that. Biting my tongue very hard, but we've got some time. So early intervention is an important. Early help is always an early point in identification in where we're saying that, and I fully support that. But this is a two-pronged thing, isn't it? Because you've got those young people that are already in the system, and those that are coming through and in too. So it's how we deal with them on that are on the way in, isn't it? As well as it's a two-pronged strategy that we have. So the point I'm making is at the moment there are a number of young people that have been demonstrating different problems that may not have been readily identified at an early stage. Yes. Now we're going to deal with identification will be better, and those that are in the system we will be helping as much as we can.
Yeah, and I think that's how those two strands. So that we've got one strand which is around getting the right support at the right time, intervening early, and then the second strand which is around accessing the right support and provision. And this is a bit like what Andrew was saying in terms of the autism pathway. That it's all very well doing a lot of work around better identification of children who might need an autism diagnosis and having the resources for this assessment. But then there's the so what question at the end of it. How do we make sure that we've got the right support available at the other end of it? I think for me that the right support and provision strand has got a big focus around our sufficiency of educational provision. We know we've got big gaps around provision for children with social, emotional, mental health. So we've got plans underway for building 2 new free schools in that area. Also a significant programme of capital work to build more enhanced, able to meet. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'll bring Ruth in for one more, and then we'll move. I'll bring Ruth and then John.
It will stop at some point, Chair, honest. So you made the comment about children spending a lot of time in schools. So about 32 hours a week in school. The rest of the time is at home, generally. So I'm presuming, you know, obviously the strategy does talk about this wraparound. There will be support for families to be able to identify and support needs of their children outside of a school environment, and the two linking together within this. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
So there's a few things in that question in terms of does the strategy contain things for support for families? Yes, it's got things like focus on short breaks around wraparound care for children, also around the post-assessment support around autism, so on and so forth. I think in terms of clearly children spend most of their time with their families, and if the question is about is there a path, something specific about a pathway for families identifying SEN.
Do you want me to be a bit clearer? Sorry, my question.
Then I'd have thought school doing that.
So my question is around the fact that, and Amelia will back me on this, we are having a lot of children starting schools, nowhere near ready where they need to be for a school, and that a lot of that support needs to start within the home. So how are we supporting families to get the children into a position for education and to be able to clearly identify if it's a SEND need?
Yes, that's a wider part of the Education for Life strategy, school readiness.
So if I can come in there, and we have touched on this, haven't in other places. I think we have some. It's about getting different interlocking bits of the system all working harmoniously, and I think that's a really critical piece. But obviously, we've got a huge amount here in the SEND strategy, but we also have Connect Somerset, and that piece. You know, those two need to and will dovetail, because that early help bit, which this refers to, but it is a piece in its own right. And then through the education strategy, we also we're just setting up a new steering group focusing on a best start in life. So that looking at, and that's the big focus from the start is on identifying children, including pre-birth, and that's bringing in our colleagues from the health system around health visiting, midwifery, and also early years settings. So it's not just about services, but it's all those touch points. The point of those is that they are touch points with the family. So those pieces, and if it feels complicated, it is. But what we're moving towards is that we have these different strategies that do have touch points, and the one you've identified is a clear point, almost in the middle of that Venn, where they all speak to each other. But I think that's the bulk of the work would sit in a different part of the strategy world, as it were. Is that even remotely yeah?
Thank you. John, Councillor Hunt, then we'll sum up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just going to be careful how I say this because it sounds a bit uncaring, but it certainly doesn't come from that place. Firstly, thank you, Andrew and Rob. Tremendous work. I mean, amazing presentation too. Like most governors, I do school visits, and on the last two I've done, actually, it's been sort of in the assembly hall, all the children there, and one or two children, one in particular, who is making lots of noise, shouting out loud, not their fault at all, but it's completely disrupting the school. They or these particular children would then disrupt the classroom. It's very difficult for the teaching staff. Additional resources have to be found, and one child is taking up the time of two or even three staff members. And it's very clear, and this is from a purely layman perspective, to me anyway, it's very clear to me that clearly the child is suffering because they are causing disruption. I'm told that they are being disrupted because they're unhappy, and they are reacting to their surroundings, which isn't good for them. It's also not good for the children at the school because it's interrupting their education, not good for the staff, and not good for the parents, etc. I mean, it seems to me. I mean, this is all these words are fantastic.
We need to be careful we don't start identifying individuals.
No, I'm not doing that. I definitely wouldn't do that, Chair. Don't worry about that. I'm just concerned that all these words that we've got here are terrific, but at the actual on the ground, how do we solve those sort of problems? Because it seems to me that the child needs help, the children need help, and they're clearly not suited to that type of environment, a primary school in this case, education.
Well, I think Amelia's going to come back on.
Yes, I'll leave Rob on the question related to SEND, but I think my sense is this is more of a question about mainstream education and the nature of mainstream education. And one of the things that we need to be thinking about when we think about what mainstream education is like is that when there are children who are struggling with the mainstream environment, what you're seeing is that it's not about, we focus on the child, but actually the root cause is what education is like. And one of the things that we need to be thinking about is what does education need to be like so that children don't struggle with it. And what you will see is that underneath the surface, there will be other children who are struggling, but they're just able to cover that struggle over so it's not visible. But it doesn't mean that the struggle isn't there. They're just hiding it better. And what you see, and we see this, we've got lots of failing schools, is that in a failing school, you will have more children who are no longer able to keep a lid on that struggle. It's not them, it's the school. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to evolve what education is like so that children don't struggle with it. And that there's a lot of assumptions that we have about how schools have to be that aren't true. And schools don't have to be like that. They can be different, but that's an evolution for the adults in the system to think differently about what they're doing.
I think I'd just really echo that to a large extent in terms of saying, you know, you asked a question in terms of the child isn't right for the school. Yeah, and the question has to be, well, what does the school need to be like to be right for the child? And in some respects with schools, it feels fairly easy because we do have special schools. We do have different places where you can put people. But then I think when you take the preparation for adulthood view on this and say, well, what's going to be the right job for that child when they grow up? What's going to be the right house for them to live in? What's going to be the right party for them to go to? What's going to be the right clubs for them to join? All of those things. We kind of get into a space of saying, well, are we going to accept that those children shouldn't be involved in those things and that there's somewhere else that they need to go? Or has our focus got to be on working with the mainstream schools and setting to say, well, what does it take to involve people and what would it take in assembly to make that work? And I know that it's easy for me to say sitting here as an abstract thing rather than being in school every day, because none of this stuff is easy, and it's not easy for anyone involved. But I think our prime focus has got to be on creating schools and a system that includes children and young people so that they can thrive, because that will be better for them and for.
A wonderful point to pause on.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so very briefly, so what we can do then is to help the school itself in our wraparound idea, to help that child and to help the other children in the school as well, so that we can make the school adapt around. Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the report, President. Members, thank you for that. The partnership arrangement, the more we can build partnership arrangement, the better. It has to be welcomed and fully supported. And it will make children's lives better the bigger the partnership, the bigger we're able to share the load and find a way for it. And we've been asked to make a report. I'm sure that we can. There are a number of points that were made up. 6 months or before, I look forward to seeing the first set of reports in the same way. I would welcome, for me in the first instance, if you could, when meetings are starting to happen, I know there'll be officer-led meetings, but it might be interesting for me in my sad sort of interest to dip in and out of to see how things are going, to see where it goes. Otherwise, thank you for that. So we're happy to members are happy to note the report. I know it's that Paul and Jane have joined us, but I'm just going to take a very short comfort break for members. Okay, 10 minutes. I'm back and we'll be up and running at 5 past, if that's okay, please. Thank you. Okay, members, if you'd like to start taking your seats, we'll get ourselves back up and running again. Thank you. Okay, members, are we all seated comfortably? Thank you for coming back. I'm just conscious that I'm going to try to bring us back. That's no, that's fine. No worries. We'll try to plough on it, and we won't be carrying. There's no big decisions. It's more a matter of feeding it. So, um, item 9 of our agenda, then, members, is the reforms in social care draft consultation response. The paper was circulated a little bit later than the agenda, I'm afraid, but it was there and it's been done. The idea is obviously for us to have a look at it, to make any comments or issue or points that was there. I'm going to introduce to Paul Shawcross and Jane, just to say to our next meeting is not until July, and I believe that Paul will be leaving us. So I just want to thank him for his efforts and communication with the committee, and wish him luck for the future. And hopefully you'll be back into a nice authority like us again sooner rather than later. But thank you for that. I'm going to Tessa, did you want to introduce it, or are you happy for Paul to move on? I take the silence. So Paul, carry on, sir. You need to get onto the button faster, Tessa, please.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to hand over to Paul. It's fine, thank you.
Thank you for your time, Tessa. Paul.
Okay, so hopefully you will have had a chance to look at the presentation, which is, I guess, very brief, trying to summarise the children's social care reforms that we're here to talk about. Essentially, in terms of the context, there were 3 separate reviews published in 2022, one of which was the independent review of children's social care, a really big piece of work led by Josh McAllister, who's I guess a key figure in terms of children's social work. That made a number of recommendations, including an investment of £2 billion over 5 years, which you may not be surprised to hear is not forthcoming at this point. Another major report, which you will have no doubt heard of, was the Child Safeguarding Review Panel reported into the tragic deaths of Arthur Labinjo Hughes and Star Hobson. And there were lessons that emerged from that review, which I think have been discussed here previously. And finally, I guess lesser known, the Competition and Markets Authority review was looking at the provision of children's residential homes and the availability of them in the context of the market position. So as a result of those 3 reviews, the government published a paper called Stable Homes Built on Love, which is an implementation strategy, and it comes with £200 million of additional investment. I think for me that the use of the word love in that was quite an interesting one. It's not something we hear very often, is it, in government papers? But I think a positive sign that there's a recognition that systems and structures will help provide stability and permanence and care for young people. But the love element is something which we perhaps need to talk about a little bit more often. So the strategy is based, if we could go on to the next slide, on 6 key pillars of reform. I'm going to talk about some of these, and Jane will chip in as well, because some of those are her service area. So the first one is to ensure that family help provides the right support at the right time, so that children can thrive with their families. And I think just hearing the tail end of that conversation, clearly that's something that's in everybody's minds. It's wanting to ensure that there's more support available early for families, that family help services are welcoming and multidisciplinary, work really closely alongside existing services, bring in wider family networks. There is going to be an investment in Families First for Children Pathfinders, which we in Somerset would certainly express a strong interest in being part of. We feel very proud about our early help services, our family intervention service,
And I think we could certainly contribute and learn from that Pathfinder if we are able to join. I think in terms of our response to that, as I say, we do have a very good quality early help service via the family intervention teams. However, I think we recognise that below that, the community-based level 2 support is something which we need to do better on, and Connect Somerset has already been mentioned as part of our response to that. If we can move on to the next slide. Decisive multi-agency child protection system. Clearly this comes out of the STAR and Arthur review. So a recommendation is that the Pathfinder will test a new child protection lead practitioner role, which will co-work with family health teams. I think at the moment we are reserving judgment on whether we feel that's the right thing to do. I think there are definitely benefits to that role, and we certainly are looking within our existing service plan to incorporate and involve social workers more in our local authority early help services to avoid the need for families to step up and step down between different services. But we also have some concerns that focusing safeguarding child protection work in individual practitioners perhaps takes something away from the wider system. And I know that it's not a universally held view, but I think it's something that we're certainly considering. We'd like to see a little bit more about what that might look like. Similarly, national multi-agency child protection standards, on the face of it, sounds like a really good idea. I think we would certainly recognise that there needs to be more consistency in terms of how we manage child protection across England. But there also needs to be a level of local responsibility and decision making around how systems best support children within individual areas. Improved information sharing and a bespoke response to harms outside of the home. So in Somerset, we are participating, in fact leading on an information sharing project. So we're working alongside central government to develop a national safeguarding data sharing agreement. We've been given a significant chunk of money working alongside colleagues in Bristol to do that, so we're really central to that piece of work. There's an action about exploring how the role of education can be strengthened, including consultation on its role as a safeguarding partner. So in terms of the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership, the statutory partners at the moment are the local authority, health and the police. Clearly the education has links with the local authority, but there's a whole network of schools and trusts out there who perhaps are slightly distant from that, and we have already had discussions within Somerset about how we could potentially include education more actively in some of that work. The last point on that slide is around tackling court delays and improving parental engagement in the family courts, where children can't live safely with their family. This is a particular difficulty for us in Somerset. Our court timescales are some of the worst in the country at the moment. Without wishing to absolve ourselves of responsibility, that is in part due to a significant delay in achieving the full cohort of judges within Somerset court area. We are very much supportive of this action. We're working very closely with our colleagues in the local Family Justice Board to think about how we can all work much more closely together to tackle delays. A lot of those are around additional assessments that we don't necessarily support, around delays in family members coming forward to be assessed. So I absolutely support that as a really key area of developing practice.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so pillar 3 is very much around unlocking the potential of family networks, and the two areas they're focusing on in the consultation are areas that we feel already is very strong in Somerset, and we're very proud of the work we're doing. We have a family group conference service that has been recognised nationally and undertakes some fantastic work across the system about both preventing children coming into care, but also looking further down the system around connection, reconnection, and reunification. And we're looking at that model at the moment in our leaving care service around some of those connections when the care leavers choose to move on. So we are continuing to develop in that area, but feel quite strongly that we've got a good hold on that. The other area within this kind of pillar is the kinship care strategy they're proposing that we welcome. We know we are seeing an increase in number of kinship assessments and arrangements.
We also know that we do get some breakdowns in these, and we're working hard to understand what that breakdown is around, how quickly we know about that, and how we can wrap around that support to prevent that happening. With regards to exploring financial allowances, this is something we've already started to do, and we are considering paying all of our sort of arrangements like that kind of basic allowance across the system through to those special guardianships. Whereas at the moment it's a means tested allowance. So we are looking at that to see if that will ensure that we have more stability there and allow our children to be in those family relationships and to feel kind of supported in that environment. We also need to balance that against that offer to foster carers around training and support, and making sure that those kinship carers, we're not putting them under too much pressure, asking them to do that equivalent of what we do with foster carers, because that could well mean some of them say no. So it's about getting that balance right around support, engagement, and making sure that it's not a detriment to them to care for other family members. Okay, so moving on to pillar 4 then, which is around the stable homes, and where that word love comes in again, that Paul's already talked about, and how pleased we were to see that in there really. And some of that comes from what our children tell us, what they want, the kind of home they want to be in, what they need from adults, what they need from people that are going to care for them. And what we know here in Somerset is we listen to our children, and so many of our initiatives and ongoing work and day-to-day work is a result of what they tell us. So they tell us and we respond and we do. So all of the things that we see in pillar 4, you know, we are working towards, we're happy to continue to work, and we see these as really positive kind of proposals that are being made. So fostering, and everyone I'm sure in this room has heard lots about fostering and our need to have more foster carers in Somerset, and to retain more foster carers, because what we know is we want as many of our children as possible to be in that family type home arrangement rather than in external placements, residentials, etc., etc. So there's a really big drive on foster care recruitment. We know that nationally it's taken a hit. It's not just about this area. So that idea of a national campaign and that real focus on it is welcomed. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment with our partnership with the Shaw Trust around that. And we've had some really good TV adverts. We saw a 200% increase in inquiries, and now it's about making sure we're following those through to increase that number of carers. We also know for those children that aren't in fostering homes and are in other types of placements, that sometimes we aren't happy with the quality of that care. We know there's a big retention issue again in that field of work. Recruiting workers to be in residential care is really, really difficult. So we welcome that kind of leadership and management, and making that a profession that people feel adequately supported, trained for, and kind of remunerated for, really. So that would be really good to see. We also know that with some of those homes that we do get homes that are closed down by Ofsted, sometimes quite quickly, and we often challenge that and question that, because some of them, those children, our children, go into homes that aren't as good quality, or provision that isn't up to the standard we would want. So we have an ongoing challenge discussion with Ofsted around what's their role in supporting this provision to put those things right, rather than actually being closed down unless there's an immediate risk to that child. So, you know, those kind of conversations are really important to have, and that part of that review of that standards of care, regulations and guidance, we hope will enable some of those conversations to happen, and providers will feel supported by Ofsted rather than just worried about losing that registration. We've already attended a consultation meeting around the regional care cooperatives for the South West. There was some concern expressed in this region around the size of this region and how such a cooperative could work and would work. So, but to reassure here that we have started those conversations, and some of that feedback has already been sent back to national around that. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to put, sorry, we missed there's a second 4, sorry, it just looked the same. Thank you. Okay, so what we also know is that the work that we do with children in Somerset is about relationships. It's about building those relationships, and that's what children tell us. They want trusted adults that they can talk to, work with, and that will help them. So all the proposals all around that befriending and mentoring, we see as really, really positive, and we're making some progress in that in the county ourselves. When this consultation was sent out to our participation officer, they questioned actually how the consultation was shared to make it accessible for our children and young people, and that's been sent back. But one of the things they certainly did say is they wanted more people to be corporate parents, that wider kind of remit for public sector and outside of it to recognise the role they could play in corporate parent and supporting our children in care. Education, employment and training is a key focus area for our children in care and our care leavers. Whilst for our care leavers, our numbers of children not in education, employment and training have been quite low. It continues to be a real focus area for us. We know the points that we sometimes, our care leavers will drop out, and we need to find those opportunities and be creative about that and ensure that isn't a dropout point for them. And I think lastly, just the work around mental health and the physical health challenges that some of our children in care and care leavers face. We've seen very evident post-COVID as well. It's really good the work that we're doing with CAMS and health around the Homes and Horizons work, because we've got that really good link between social care, health and education, which we feel can provide that wraparound offer and provision for our children. So that's where we are with that pillar.
The fifth pillar, you won't be surprised, is to see perhaps is that we need a valued, supported and highly skilled social worker for every child who needs one. One of the recommendations is that we prioritise high quality career development for social workers, establishing an early career pathway. There we go, it's coming. I think in Somerset we have a really positive career pathway for our social workers coming in as newly qualified social workers moving through the system. I think we can do even better with that, and we did put ourselves forward to be part of one of the pilots in this. Unfortunately, we weren't accepted onto that, but certainly we are open to learning from national views on how that social worker career development can be supported. To improve retention, we've worked really hard and continue to work really hard in Somerset around retention, and our focus over the next 6 months is moving slightly away from recruitment onto retention, because we've done really well in terms of recruiting newly qualified social workers. We've taken over 30 new social workers into the service in the last 6 months, but we need to make sure that we retain and support those existing social workers. There's a recommendation about reducing the cost and reliance on agency social workers. Absolutely support and agree with that. At the moment, the agency social worker market is highly dysfunctional and involves a number of poor quality social workers moving around different local authorities, pay very high rates and not doing a very good job. That's a big generalisation. We do have some very good locum social workers, but the market is really dysfunctional. So we would support anything that can be done nationally to improve that. We've also done very well to reduce our reliance on locums, and we have over 85% of our workforce is currently permanent, and that's a significant improvement on recent times. Next slide. And then this really is about looking at the whole system nationally. So introducing a system that continuously learns and improves and makes better use of evidence and data. We would certainly support this as an aim for the social care profession services within England. We do lots of learning internally and across the partnership, and we absolutely see ourselves as a learning organisation. And we are supportive of plans to think about how national learning can be better incorporated into local practice. Just one more thing to add to what Jane said. Our young people, we did consult with them, as Jane said. They didn't find the format very helpful. It's not very helpful for young people, and we will feed that. We have fed that back to the DFE. Their messages were quite clear. We would like you to do more to support us and our families, particularly families. So keeping the focus on keeping children within their families and communities is very important to our young people. Lots of feedback around listening to what we are saying, listening to what our families are saying. Also feedback around making sure that practically and financially, particularly care leavers, are supported as they move out of supported accommodation into more independent living. And that thing about having a consistent social work presence in their life, having more social workers who will stay with them, follow them through their journey through care and into adulthood. So we will make sure those key messages are fed back very strongly. Last one.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chris. It's interesting the format. It was a white, green, whatever paper they want to call it, but it was asking for responses. Didn't necessarily say how the responses were going to be dealt with and responded to. So there's that, but then there's also, we already are doing a lot of that is saying there. Again, so that's fine. But then it details where the way I read it, aspirations. It says here, we're putting this much money in, but it doesn't say how they're going to identify the bodies that they're going to put it in, where it's going to go, and how that's, and whether we stand any chances in it. So, in our, so thank you for the paper. We're responding to it. But I hope we're making the points clear that any money that's going, we want to be part of, which I'm sure is the case. We're already doing a lot of this good work, so where can we go? But also, how can we benefit from all of these things that you're saying? So, how many pages was our response? Is it gone in yet? And the point I was going to get at: can this committee support, or this scrutiny committee, if listened to what you had to say, and fully support our case for being part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. The consultation has been completed. It's not been submitted yet. It was waiting for today's meeting, amongst a number of other key pieces of information. I think the process for being involved in Pathfinders not entirely transparent. I think as a local authority who is rated good, we have a better chance of being included in that. The fact that we are doing very well in some of those areas could be helpful, or could also not be helpful in some parts of the work, because if we're already kind of down that path, then there may be limited learning. But we are certainly keen to be involved, particularly in the early help pathway. I think that's an area that we feel we could contribute to, but also learn from, in terms of particularly that pre-local authority early help. But yeah, we will certainly add that to our.
Thank you. Members, any other members wish to add any comments or John?
First of all, thank you. That was excellent, to put it mildly. I had loads of questions, and you were answering them as you were going through your presentation. Just one small point on it. Lovely to see that we're now, or you are, holding on or retaining the social workers. So 30 new ones, and concentrating on retaining the ones we already have. Clearly the right way to go, in my opinion. In terms of getting new ones, then obviously the focus now on retaining. Clearly we're trying to get new ones as well. Yeah. What are we doing now to make this offer more? I appreciate you said about the way they're trained, etc., making it a proper living, which of course it is. It's not seen that way, to get away from that stigma. But what are we doing with that? And just very finally, good luck in your career, whatever it may be.
I think we are focusing on retention. We're not there yet at all, and that's not a Somerset issue. There is a national problem in terms of retaining social workers. I think till recently the average career length of a social worker was 7 years, and that's reducing because of the nature of the work, the kind of the stresses that people encounter dealing with trauma that children have experienced. So it is a challenging profession. We are refocusing our work on retention. There's been lots of work done over a number of years, but we are looking at what we see as best practice in terms of conditions. So, for example, Somerset has very generous leave entitlements. We offer sometimes up to 5 more days a year than other local authorities, and maybe we haven't promoted that as we could, so we're thinking about that. We're always looking and benchmarking ourselves in terms of salaries. It's not the biggest, it hasn't historically been the biggest issue for social workers, but because of the cost of living crisis, it's becoming more of an issue. So we are constantly reviewing ourselves to make sure that we are competitive. We don't pay more than anybody else, but we certainly don't pay the lowest paid. So we're kind of making sure we retain that position. We feel very strongly, I think, that the support we provide to our social workers in their roles is what keeps them. So providing really good supervision from their teachers, keeping caseloads at a manageable level, training and development our offer is really positive. I think the fact that we're a safeguarding authority is helping to bring more social workers in, because social workers like working. I think the fact that we are now a good local authority is helping us to bring other social workers in from the region who are wanting to move on. Neighbouring authorities who perhaps aren't doing quite so well. So it's a fourth road bridge type of piece of work, but we are focusing on retention.
Okay, I've not seen any more questions. What I'll ask then, so members, I think it would be reasonable for us to support our response as strongly as possible and seek that Somerset's involved at every level, doing everything it can. But also we need to highlight the fact that the good work we're already doing. You know, the fact that our foster care and recruitment campaign was an award winner. Is something that we often forget, the fact that we are building our foster caring teams, which is always a good thing. Excuse me. So, and I think we should be making those points as well in that. And as far as just from a personal data sharing, it's about bleeding time. We've been working on data sharing protocols for a long time, and we need to make that work, because it's to the benefit. At the moment, we're too siloed. Everyone, all of our supposed partners, and we need to be breaking down those barriers so that young people can be identified and supported at the earliest opportunity through data sharing, and that needs to be so. That's just a personal comment, because it's been something I remember our first meeting of Children and Families Scrutiny Committee. We were talking about data sharing protocols and the fact that it was problematic. So yeah, so we fully support that, and if once you get the response, perhaps if you would share that with our officers so that they can share them with the committee, just for information, and anything we can do to help fight your corner, to please come back to us. Okay, thank you. Good luck, Paul. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, members. Okay, homeward stretch, members. So we are on item 10 of our agenda. And it's for those new members to the committee. We did back towards the beginning of last year. The executive identified significant issues in relation to children's services budget, and asked the scrutiny committees to look into those areas to see if they could help. The committee took that request and looked at our two top spenders, which were external placements and home to school transport, and we decided to set up two task and finish groups. The first one ran and came to fruition, which is the external placements, which I'm going to introduce Tessa. So that report was submitted back to the executive, and this is I'm sure Tessa's going to and Claire are going to update us on that. So Tessa.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Can I just say thank you very much to the members of the Task and Finish group, because their report has been very helpful, and that has actually, the executive has seen that, but we're actually wanting to have a bit of a deeper look at it. However, what I'm going to do, if I may, is hand over to Claire to pick up the sort of the key points and your recommendations, and she will deal with her response to that. But I just want to reassure you that it's not lost anywhere, and we are actually wanting to spend a bit more time on this and some other matters that relate to children, families and education. So we will be doing that in a specific meeting very shortly. Thank you. I'll hand over to Claire, if I may. Claire, you're on mute.
Wasn't it? Sorry. So I was going to provide an update for the committee on the recommendations that you made in the task and finish group in terms of where we are currently. So in relation to the first point about the council enhancing its own capacity and provision for placements by creating more homes in Somerset, we're currently, as you'll know, working with the Shore Trust with the Homes and Horizons project, part of which is to create both residential and foster homes for children with complex needs. So those children are children who would currently be in either unregistered placements or high cost placements that are outside Somerset. So for those children, we have 2 children's homes open, and we have the 3rd and 4th due to open in the next few weeks. We have a small number of children in those homes at the moment, but we're building them to being as near capacity as is reasonable for the children who are there currently. No home is more than 3 bedrooms for children. And we are also in the process of purchasing homes 5 and 6, so that we're clear that we have a trajectory in terms of building those homes and making sure that they're suitable for children with complex needs to live in. We've also started to recruit foster carers for the complex needs fostering scheme. So that scheme is to take up to 20 young people with complex needs who we believe could be moved from residential care to fostering were the suitable foster carers. So we have a number of children in residential care currently who do not need to be in residential care, but there is an insufficient number of foster carers able to look after them. So there are currently 7 people or 7 families in the pipeline being assessed for children to move into the complex fostering service, which is great. We're also doing some work with our own in-house fostering service. As Lee said earlier, we did very well in terms of contacts from the advertising. We now need to convert those into actual foster homes for children. And we're doing some work with a consultancy called Empower to look at how we do that best and how we sustain our fostering cohort, because like every other authority in the country, foster carers are leaving either to retire or to do different things with their lives, and it's difficult to have a significant enough cohort of new carers to be able to take the children who need those provisions. So we are doing everything we can, we believe, to develop the sufficiency of fostering and residential care for children in Somerset through our own provision. We do still work with the independent sector in terms of residential and foster homes, having sufficiency in-house, and that is work that we continue to do to try and support them to deliver the best quality care and to work with more local providers so that we can bring children back to Somerset and to keep them nearer home wherever we possibly can. In terms of the next point about the council not to make any placements in unregistered provision, we completely agree with the sentiment of that and the principle of it. Unfortunately, like every other local authority in the country, there are not providers out there who will take the most complex children. So some children are, their placements are terminated, if you like, by their residential provider at no or very short notice because they cannot manage their behaviours, and there are no other providers in the country who will take them. So we do currently have a small number of children who are in unregistered provision. They are the highest priority children to move into the Homes and Horizons residential homes as soon as they're open. But we do have to consider that once we've got one child in a residential home, we have to match the next child to them. We can't just put children in and hope it all works out because they'll have different needs. So we are working through the group of children in unregistered provision. I think it's currently 5, which is lower than it has been previously, to make sure that those children can have a home in Somerset, preferably in Homes and Horizons, with very good staff who are managing incredibly complex children very well in the first few months of this project. With the aim that we will not have unregistered provision. That's our complete aim, but we are not there yet. In terms of the recommendation about buying block contract places to increase capacity, that's quite an interesting point, in that we do sometimes look at block contracting. The trouble with block contracting is that the providers of residential care have a duty with Ofsted to maintain their registration to match the children that they take into their care. So if we block contract with a provider for, say, I don't know, 10 beds in 3 or 4 homes, they could take 4 children, one into each of those homes, and then come to an assessment that there is no that those children are not suitable to be matched with the other children we want to place there. So we've effectively wasted the cost of 6 beds because we can't match against them. So it's quite an art in terms of block contracting, in terms of how we do it, who we do it with, and the numbers that we do it with. So we do definitely consider it and use it where it's appropriate, but it isn't always appropriate because of the void, what's called voids, which is where you can't fill the bed because actually nobody's a suitable match to the child who's already been placed in that contract. In terms of a language point, yes, completely agree that we should refer to the placements that children are in rather than children being placed. And in terms of lobbying the government, I think at the moment there's a national view through the ADCS, which we are talking to central government about through the ADCS, about the insufficiency of placements for children and the types of children who are really struggling to be placed. And that's the types of children tends to be the same right across the country. So it's children with complex mental health needs, where they don't meet the criteria for a CAMHS hospital bed, children who for some reason need secure welfare provision because there aren't enough secure welfare beds in the country. And I think the other category, which I think is becoming a national picture, is children with disabilities, particularly autism, where providers are either not registered for those types of children because it's a different type of registration, or they don't have the skill set in their staff group to be able to care for those children. And as Paul said previously, the workforce, the whole children's social care workforce, is at a stretched point, as it is in most other sectors, to be fair, in terms of care. And the residential sector is a real struggle. So when you're asking people to care for children with quite complex needs and challenging behaviour, they are the places that people are less willing to work. And therefore some of those provisions are now closing. You may have seen in the news last weekend a national provider closing its homes because they just can't recruit the workforce for those homes for children. And I think your final point was about having a Homes and Horizons report update for every 6 months. And that would be, yes, we're very happy to do that. We're very proud of what's happening there. I'm very keen to explain to people what's happening and the progress that's being made in that provision.
Claire, thank you. Tessa, thank you. Just for members, that was the initial feedback for our group. Jamie, just to remind me where it goes, what happens next.
Sorry, just bear with. I mean, ultimately, so the process is that obviously the executive or the lead member will provide a formal response to the committee, which we've had. A review of the task and finish group outcomes by the committee should then be agreed accordingly by the committee and the lead member. So,
okay, so that's fine. So my assumption then, Claire and Tessa, will be that we'll get a written response from you to our point, so that we can then just have a quick recap with the task and finish group that we're going forward. That would then complete the circle. I'm taking the silence as a yes. Then that's fine. Members, any points or questions or further comments in relation to that? Okay, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Tessa. Item 11 is a quick update in relation to the second part of our task and finish group, which was the home to school transport. Rob, did you just want to give us a quick catch up, please?
Yes, Chair, happy to do that. So just to update the committee on the home to school travel piece of work, we've commissioned Edge Public Solutions to undertake a review of the council's home to school travel operations. This has been led by Richard Hall, who's one of their directors. As part of the review, Richard met with members of the Scrutiny Committee Task and Finish group. He's now prepared a final report and presentation which has been shared with officers for comment. We're going to arrange a further meeting for the Task and Finish group to meet with Richard to discuss the report and conclusions, and then alongside this, officers and lead members will meet to agree actions in response to the report recommendations, and we will take any proposals back to the Task and Finish group.
Okay, thank you for the update. Members, we're happy that I know that the members of the Task and Finish group are looking forward to having that, because it is an interesting point. And so when will the report be, you say that it's with officers now? when will it be shared so the councillors can see it? Cool. Because I will, there are a number of members I'm sure will have an interest in reading and understanding that as well, because we're talking big numbers when it comes to overspending, and how we can address those and bring those down will be of interest to lots of members, because I know that the budget is something that we'll be looking at imminently. Councillor Nicholson, did you want to come in?
Only when other people have finished.
I have finished.
Yes, I don't know whether the members of the Task and Finish group are still members of Scrutiny or not. It's something I am very interested in. Absolutely, it is one of our big costs. It's one of the ones that we need to work on. On the other hand, we also need to make sure that it serves the people that we need it to serve. And this is where I bring my governor hat into the room. I'm aware of some questions sometimes about whether it works perhaps as well as it might be, and I just would hope that that can be part of the consideration of the rule.
Thank you, noted. And then good point. Actually, I hadn't thought about the membership of that committee may have changed with it. So I'll review that with the vice chair to make sure that we do. And I'm sure that the areas qualification criteria and stuff like that will be part of the review that takes place, because it is an important element in Ruth.
Just one thing that's occurred to me, Chair, that we've obviously had the report today on the SEND strategy, and one of the outcomes in the SEND strategy is around that wraparound provision and children being able to access outside of school hours. And obviously that's a challenge with students that access transport, because school transport is beginning, end of the school day. So just whether that Task and Finish group can consider the coordination between those.
Thank you. I'm just conscious, so a couple of points there. So we need to, so if we could note for action points for and we need to confirm that the membership of the Task and Finish group, and see whether we need to enhance that. We need to look at the initial response for the homeschool transport, and then how it links with our SEND strategy, to make sure that that is all tied up, and then with a view to bringing an initial report back at our next meeting, which will be there's a couple of months, so there should be time in that, and then the sharing of the report at the earliest opportunity to all members. Okay with that? Super. Okay, moving on then. Item 12 of our agenda. Again, members, new members to this committee, this is something for information. So what we have found previously was that we would, people would come to, officers would come to members, to the chair and vice chair, and say, we want your committee to look at this report or this, or to, and as you can see, we have quite packed agendas. So sometimes I will say, if it's to note, or for further, I'll say, that's fine, send it. We'll send it out to all members of the committee with a view to have a look. Hopefully they spend some time looking. And if there are any points or issues in relation to that, they can then either contact the author, the report author, or bring it back to this committee, so that we can then, if there's elements that we need to look at, we can do. So the two bits that we were supported with, information about the Children and Families Board, and the information around the Education for Life event, which was launched and circulated. So I haven't been made aware of any points or feedback from that. But again, that's, you'll see that our clerk will send out items for information, and it's more a matter of if you please find the time to go through those to see whether there are any relevant points or issues that are there, then we can do that. Councillor Nicholson.
Just because I'm a new member, the information on Children and Families Board, don't know whether I will have seen it. Perhaps it could be sent to new members too.
That's a good point. Actually, we'll make sure that those points, the stuff that's been circulated before, between the last meeting and this meeting, is actually it's a really good point. Is also included to the new members of this committee. But thank you for highlighting that. That's appreciated. Okay, congratulations. There being no further business, meeting closed. Thank you for your time.